With over 1,000 monsters to choose from in D&D, it can be hard to know which ones to use, and even harder to know how to play them. What weapons do they favor? What tactics would they use? How do they interact with other types of monsters? These are all questions that can come up to DMs that are looking to make their combats more enticing for their players. It's certainly one that I struggled with. That's why I'm back today with another monster breakdown for D&D. Hello again everyone, I'm Bill from AltRoll, and today I'm going to dive into a brief history of a D&D creature, how that history was adapted into 5th edition, and how this lore can help game masters make their combat encounters better. So, whether you're here for the cool lore breakdown or for the combat tactics, I'm hoping to give you a lot more to chew on when it comes to the monsters we face in D&D. For episode 13, let's peel back the layers on this onion and look at the Ogre. The earliest writings on ogres date back to the 12th century, in Creshon de Troyes' unfinished story, Percival, the Story of the Grail. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, the ogre became a staple monster in mythology and folklore, being depicted as inhumanly large creatures with unusually colored skin, a voracious appetite, and an inhuman strength. Closely linked with giants and cannibals, ogres were most well known for eating humans, favoring infants and children the most. While ogres were popular in Europe, the Japanese oni developed in a similar way, being described as a version of ogre or troll in East Asian folklore. While the titular character Shrek may have catapulted the ogre to fame in modern film, the ogre has also been present in games such as Warhammer Fantasy and Dungeons & Dragons. In D&D, ogres were one of the earliest creatures brought to the game, introduced in the original white box set in 1974. Ranked number 3 in the 10 best low-level monsters by the authors of Dungeons & Dragons for Dummies, the authors stated the ogre, quote, teaches players about fighting big, powerful, stupid monsters, which is an iconic D&D experience, end quote. Described as large and fearsome monsters, ogres have remained ever present as a monster and playable race in later editions of the game. These later editions also introduced half-breed ogres such as the Ogrillon, Marrow, and Half-Ogre, to name a few. In 5th edition, ogres are described as hulking giants that measure between 9 and 10 feet tall and weigh close to 1,000 pounds. While immensely strong, they're also incredibly lazy, choosing to raid, scavenge, and kill others for food and pleasure. While they'll eat almost anything, they heavily favor dwarves, halflings, and elves, chasing them down and consuming them raw. One of the defining features of the ogre, other than their size, is their temper. Any perceived slight can invoke their wrath, from insulting it or calling it names to simply looking at it the wrong way. Once an ogre is angry, it'll throw a tantrum, smashing anything and anyone until there's nothing left to break. While easy to anger, they're also extremely stupid. Few ogres can count to 10, even with their fingers in front of them. Communicating with a broken, toddler-level understanding of the giant and common languages, ogres tend to believe what they're told, though trying too hard to trick an ogre will just make them angry. Ogres make their home at the edge of settled lands, bedding down in caves, animal dens, or even isolated cabins and farmhouses. They'll clothe themselves in pelts from animals or humanoid prey and use uprooted trees and stone-tipped javelins as tools and weapons. Whenever bored or hungry, an ogre ventures out for its next meal of unprotected livestock or the farmers who tend to them. Ogres may also bring sacks on their raid, filling them with things they consider to be treasure. These treasures can be anything that strikes the ogre's fancy, from moldy cheese to a live pig, but all ogres prize silver and gold the most. Indeed, one of the few ways to earn an ogre's trust is by offering it gold, which it will greedily take back to its lair. While large enough to be a dangerous force on their own, ogres will occasionally band together in nomadic groups. These pseudo-tribal groups have no real connection to each other though, and members will come and go as the ogres capture or trade each other for food and weapons. These bands will also associate with goblinoids, orcs, and trolls, making them a common find in monstrous armies commanded by big bad evil guys. While they may serve an evil entity powerful enough to command them, an ogre's loyalty is only split between two things: themselves and giants. As members of the giant race, ogres rank beneath all others in their social structure, known as the ordning. As a result, an ogre will do anything that a giant asks them to, and practically worships them as greater beings. In summary, ogres are large, dumb brutes that use their stature to bully, kill, and eat anything they can, only listening to their own gluttonous cravings and the orders of greater giants. Now that we've examined their lore, let's pivot over to the ogre's mechanics by looking at their stat block. This is what the ogre's stat block looks like. Let's break it down section by section and look at what's listed here in detail. Starting at the top, we have their size, creature type, and alignment. Size in 5th edition defines the space a creature takes up in combat, with a large creature taking up a 10-foot by 10-foot square or hex on a battle map. Using the 3.5 edition Dungeon Master's Guide, shown here, ogres can be between 8 and 16 feet tall and weigh anywhere between 500 pounds and 2 tons. As stated in their lore, they tend towards the middle of this range, being around 9 to 10 feet tall and weighing around 1,000 pounds. Their creature type is giant. Giants are human-like creatures that tower over regular humanoids, and includes the various types of giant as well as Ettins, Fomorians, ogres, and trolls. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world, and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes towards society and order. The alignment of the ogre is chaotic evil, meaning they act with arbitrary violence spurred by their greed, hatred, or bloodlust. Below that top bar are the rest of the ogre's stats, which are essential for the Dungeon Master to play them in combat. The ogre has an armor class of 11, 7d10 plus 21 hit points, or 59 on average, and a movement speed of 40 feet. Looking at their ability scores, ogres have 19 strength, 8 dexterity, 16 constitution, 5 intelligence, 7 wisdom, and 7 charisma. With 10 being average for an ability score, ogres have high strength and constitution, and low dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. For their skills and proficiencies, the ogre has dark vision out to 60 feet, a passive perception of 8, speaks common and giant, has a proficiency bonus of +2, has a challenge rating of 2, and awards 450 experience points when killed. For offensive actions, the ogre has a great club attack and a javelin attack. The great club attack has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 2d8 +4 bludgeoning damage on a hit. The javelin attack has a +6 to hit, a melee reach of 5 feet, a thrown range of 30 feet normally and 120 feet at disadvantage, and deals 2d6 +4 piercing damage on a hit. Lastly, we have their environment tags. When using digital resources, we can see that ogres can be found almost everywhere, being located in the Arctic, coasts, deserts, forests, grasslands, hills, mountains, swamps, and the Underdark. Now that we've gone through and sorted out their stat block, we can begin to relate the ogre's lore and abilities to how we should be using them in combat encounters. Specifically, we're going to look at how they behave, how they would approach a combat situation, and how to get into the mind of an ogre if you want to fight effectively as one. How do we do this? Well, we'll need to take the lore and stat block of the monster and compare that with how that information is intended, referencing tactics and interpretations from The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon. Let's start by going through Amon's key assumptions one by one and relating them to the ogre as we go. The first of Amon's assumptions is that most creatures want to survive, and if seriously wounded, will try to flee combat. Exceptions to this rule are fanatics or intelligent beings who believe they'll be hunted down and killed if they do flee. Seriously wounded can be subjective, but we can assume that threshold to roughly be 1/3 of the creature's health. With an average of 59 hit points, 1/3 of that would be rounded up to 20. Given their sheer stupidity and furious tempers, an ogre won't always run away from a combat encounter, either because they don't realize that they're actually losing, or they're just too angry to give up the fight. However, if they are reduced to 20 hit points or fewer, an ogre may retreat from combat, using its greater speed to simply outrun whatever's threatening it. Next up, let's look at how their alignment can impact their thinking. On the scale of good to evil, good creatures tend to be friendly to others, whereas evil creatures are hostile to others. On the scale of lawful to chaotic, lawful monsters may try to capture or non-lethally subdue others, whereas chaotic monsters would just kill them. Since ogres are chaotic evil, we know two main things about them. First, since they're chaotic, ogres will tend to kill and possibly eat anyone unlucky enough to survive a battle with them. Second, since ogres are evil creatures, they are going to be outwardly hostile to other creatures, especially those that they believe to be weaker than them. Continuing with their mindset, let's dive into some of their mental ability scores. Ogres have an intelligence score of 5. With regards to intelligence scores lower than 7, Amon states, "A creature with intelligence of 7 or less operates purely from instinct. That doesn't mean it uses its features ineffectively, only that it has one preferred modus operandi and isn't going to be able to adjust if that stops working." For the ogre, this just means that they're going to be driven by their anger and hunger, typically in that order. Its methods are going to be straightforward and largely rely on brute strength and hardiness to win a fight. Ogres also have a wisdom score of 7. With regards to wisdom scores of 7 or less, Amon states, "A creature with wisdom of 7 or less has an underdeveloped survival instinct and may wait too long to flee." As I mentioned earlier, the ogre will be more likely than others to be blinded by its rage, or simply not realize that it's in danger of dying. This can cause them to not only stay in fights that they are losing, but continue to pursue fights where they never had a chance to win in the first place. Now that we've set up how they think, let's look at the ogre's physical abilities that influence how they fight. Thinking like Amon, we can assume the following. Creatures with high strength focus on melee combat and won't need to compensate with greater numbers. As such, they won't need to outnumber an enemy to be willing to take a fight. Creatures with low dexterity, whatever their strength or constitution, will need to choose their battles carefully. Since their ability to avoid damage is poor, they'll want some other type of advantage. Creatures with high constitution typically have a hit point advantage over their enemies, and because of that, they're less likely to hide in combat since they can soak up a couple attacks before going down. To recap our earlier stat block examination, ogres have high strength, low dexterity, and high constitution. Comparing this to the previous assumptions that we put forward, we can safely assume that ogres are brawlers who will rush into melee combat and use their immense strength to bludgeon their foes to death. The last major premise from Amon is that in D&D 5th edition, unless otherwise specified, any creature gets their full movement, one action, one bonus action, and one reaction, just like any player character does. Amon posits that any creature that exists within the game world will have evolved in accordance with this rule, and it will seek to obtain the best possible result from the action economy of the game. This means they will combine whatever movement, actions, bonus actions, and reactions are available to them for the best possible outcome. Being a simple brute, the ogre doesn't have any special abilities that allow it to maximize its action economy in major ways. However, they will be able to use their above average movement speed of 40 feet to run down their opponents very quickly. While they may throw javelins while closing the gap, an ogre will want to get into melee to use its great club, as that's the most damaging weapon option it has. So, with all of these assumptions laid out and applied to ogres, what do we now know about how to use them in combat? First, ogres are big brutes that love a fight, and will use their sheer strength and size to win those fights. Either due to their lack of intelligence or their quick tempers, ogres are not going to be using any tactics or battle plans, instead rushing in to bludgeon whatever problem they're facing. Second, ogres fight based on instinct rather than strategy, choosing targets that anger them the most. Their severe lack of intelligence means that they're not really going to learn anything from previous encounters, meaning an ogre is going to try the same thing over and over again, regardless of whether it works or not. Third, in combat, ogres will launch javelins the size of tree trunks while closing the gap, then use their great club to smash enemies to pieces. This turns melee combat with an ogre into a slugging match, where both sides will go back and forth until one side runs out of hit points. Fourth, if reduced to 20 hit points or fewer, an ogre may choose to run away from combat. This is not guaranteed, however, meaning whether or not an ogre fights to the death is up to the dungeon master running them. Fifth, if ogres win a combat encounter, they will kill and eat their defeated opponents. Unlucky adventurers may find their bones being used as necklaces, and dwarven, halfling, or elven characters may be consumed before they're even done rolling death saving throws. As a final note, these behaviors assume that the ogre is being led by itself or another ogre. However, it is possible that they may deviate from these assumptions if being commanded by another creature, such as a giant. And that brings us to the end with the ogre. All in all, ogres are a simple monster, but that simplicity has a sweet charm to it. With all the other complex tactics and strategies that monsters can use in D&D, sometimes it's nice to use a monster whose main strategy is smash it into tiny little bits until it stops moving. Personally, I like using ogres as early level boss monsters, potentially bringing them back as the party reaches level 5 or 6 to show them how far they've come. But what I want to know is, what do you think of the ogre? Do you like using these large brutes against your party? Or do you think they're too simple to represent a serious threat? You can let me know down in the comments section, or you can discuss it on the Alt-Roll Discord using the link in the description. While on the server, you can pop into our courses that teach the basics of D&D, and if you like what we do, supporting us on our Ko-fi goes a long way in helping us keep Alt-Roll going. However, that's all I had for you. With the holidays coming up, this is actually going to be our last video of 2023. So thank you all for sticking with us as we continue to grow and improve our videos. The things we do here would be nothing without all of you. Have a happy holiday season, stay safe out there, and I'll see all of you next time.